If I were to tell you that right now you could play a city builder that blends the resource management and society simulation of Dwarf Fortress, Total War style battles and diplomacy, intuitive building comparable to Prison Architect or RimWorld, and the ability to manage tens of thousands of fully simulated pops, you'd probably call me a liar. Songs of Styx is a self-described epic city-state simulator developed by a one-man team. This game takes place in a low fantasy setting where you'll be tasked with starting out as a small colony of your chosen fantasy race, building up to a small city and then empire. The game borrows many things from the aforementioned games, and I'd like to explore some of the systems and quirks of this game that, in my opinion, make it one of the best city builders out there right now. Now that I've introduced the game and hopefully caught your attention, I'll start with the first notable thing about this game, the graphics. Graphically speaking, Songs of Styx has what some would call a bad thing, pixel art as its main design. I'm sure this can put some people off, but if you've played Dwarf Fortress as an example, it shouldn't be much of an issue for you. And whilst not on the level of City Skyline, the level of detail on display is phenomenal. Nothing is obscured or hard to make out. You can zoom into individual rooms and see furniture, lighting, individual tools and limbs at work. Resources are easy to spot on the map, and you can see individual pops crafting, farming and mining with clarity. Despite the basic art style, the dev went into great effort to make the many moving elements of this game come to life. There's not much else to say in terms of graphics, but honestly it's really fun to sit back and watch thousands of little people go about their daily business, all fully animated. You can see people stripping naked and bathing in the rivers, for example, or fishing or buying and selling goods at the market. It's really charming, and it really means that the game can handle thousands and thousands of individual citizens on the screen, and it really gives it a feeling of a hustle and bustle of a real life city. With those two things out of the way, I'd like to get into what the meat of the game has to offer, and that is the gameplay. I'll try and do this by running through a start and then branching off into a few more in-depth areas of the mid to late game. When you start Songs of Styx, you'll be greeted with a tutorial, which I do recommend, as the starting phase of the game can be a bit daunting and brutal if you're not prepared. Once you do start a new game though, you'll have a choice of 6 fantasy races to pick from. The Crotonians are basically pigmen. They make great farmers and are pretty satisfied working and living in less than clean conditions. However, they aren't great at industry and are obsessed with eating food. They're recommended for newcomers as they'll teach you a lot about managing food, which is a key element of the game that I'll get into later. The Dondorians are a mountain folk who are great at crafting, mining and combat. However, they're pretty difficult to please. They hate the Tilapi and Garthami, suck at food production, and they also like living amongst the mountains the most. The Garthami are, to put it bluntly, bugmen. These fellas are quick breeders with little to no regard to living standard. They make good miners and are pretty quick. However, they are awful in combat, suck at skills beyond basic labouring, and are even worse at research. They basically lack any sort of advanced critical thinking. The humans are, well, humans. Just like us, they're good at science and management functions, they're decent farmers and they pick up skills quickly. However, they suffer from being exceptionally unremarkable in other areas. They suffer from a high criminality and mental instability and are difficult to please. So, yeah, just like humans in real life. Amevias, are lizard folk who require less food overall, are good all-rounders and are decent in combat. However, they prefer to live in hotter climates, near water, and they hate all other species. They also suck at farming and are slow breeders. Finally, the Tilapi, essentially elves, are great at woodworking, herding and ranged combat, but they're violent bastards and they hate all other species. These guys suck. Of these, I recommend the pig people and humans as a first run. They're the easiest to get the grasp of the game. Speaking of which, you'll probably need a good 3 to 5 runs before you even get acquainted with things, at least I did. The game has a very steep learning curve, and part of it is watching your civilization fail in spectacular and horrific ways, learning from it and trying not to repeat it in future runs, though that's easier said than done. It's important to bear the different races in mind, as you'll get the chance to mix and match them in your city through immigration, playing on their strengths to optimise certain aspects of your city, which can go quite well or horribly wrong, though I'll speak more on that later. With the race selected, you'll then generate a world similarly to how you would in Dwarf Fortress. It'll pre-gen the world, and then you'll select a plot on the map to colonise. You'll have to make the decision on what extra resources you want near you, as well as how much woodland, mountain or water you want as well. All of these things cater to certain races or playstyles, and there are a lot of approaches to the game because of it. For example, you can colonise an area with more gem deposits with the aim of mass producing and exporting jewellery. Once you've picked your plot, the game will then generate regions, landmarks and other factions to populate your world, and then you're booted into your city map. And once you're on your city map, you'll then want to place the throne room. This building is one of a kind and acts as the seat of government for your city. If it's destroyed or captured, you lose the game. You'll have a bunch of resources on your area map. These are denoted by different coloured boxes, so make sure to settle near at least some form of crop or plant and some water too. You'll start with 10 colonists, and from here on it's your job to make them not starve or kill each other. Now the UI can be a bit daunting here right off the bat. There are lots of buttons and sub-menus to navigate, so I'd pause the game first and familiarise yourself with these, as it can be a bit cumbersome to navigate in my opinion. To the right is a ledger with all of your population and resource information, and along the top you'll find a bit more information on your settlement, such as the pop count, how many slaves and nobles are living in your city, as well as housing, soldiers and more. The UI in this game does let it down somewhat, as a lot of critical information isn't immediately obvious or available at the start, but I'll dig into this a bit later on. From then on you'll be building basic buildings such as warehouses, housing and maybe a few farm plots here and there. The building in Songs of Six is really intuitive, and that's because they've kept it simple. Simply drag a box and it will tell you what you need for the building, and that's that. The building isn't just simple box dragging though. You'll also need to place furniture such as workstations and doors to the buildings, which will impact productivity as well as the number of employees you can hire at any given time. Essentially you'll start small and begin to build new things, researching along the way, dipping into things like trade and armies and so on and so forth, but I'll cover all these in a few minutes. Now I'm going to dive in a bit deeper into some of these systems that this game has to offer. The core gameplay loop in Songs of Six is around keeping your populace happy, and a huge variety of factors come into play to do so. If we right click on our little species icon, we get a breakdown of what exactly makes them tick, what needs they have, etc. This screen lets you plan development projects by focusing on weaker areas in your city. The main stats you want to keep an eye on here are the loyalty and happiness bars, which will dictate the likelihood of new immigrants, as well as riots and revolts, which we want to avoid. There's a lot of information here, but hovering over the bars should tell you a bit about them, what impacts them, everything from sanitation and food to leisure, job satisfaction and more are covered here, so it is a bit much. It's another criticism I do have about the UI, as for newer players navigating this and trying to decide what needs to be done can be quite hard. Simply put though, you want to make the green bar go up. Through this screen you'll be able to allocate additional food or clothing to pops, as well as what furnishings they can have in their house. You'll distribute these from warehouses to local markets and restaurants that you build, which is really cool because you'll essentially be creating a supply network with hubs throughout the city, making it feel realistic as pops gather in a main square to buy their goods. They'll then bring the furniture home and put it in their house, and it all happens in real time, so you can see pottery and beds and chairs and tables fill people's rooms, and it really does give you a sense of progression, and you can see your standard of living increase. It's really immersive and it's a really nice little feature. Now as you grow the city and unlock new buildings such as the carpenter, you'll be able to allocate unemployed populations to craft new items to advance your economy and introduce new goods to your city, either for use in other buildings and production chains or to export for money. The main draw of this game though is the balancing act that ensues. Food shortages and scares will make your population anxious and unhappy. They might riot. So you want to allocate a large proportion of your workforce to farming. However, doing this will mean fewer hands to construct or do odd jobs, or craft luxuries for trading, or research new technologies. The game is a constant struggle of supply and demand. having enough workers, food and resources to keep everyone happy and the city economy afloat. Whilst it sounds easy on paper, there are also environmental disasters thrown into the mix. So if you don't steadily grow, you can find yourself quickly struggling to provide for the city. Whilst it does sound a bit frantic when I say it, the game doesn't actually make you micro or min-max this process if you don't want to. Many workplaces can be set to automatically adjust the workers, so if your workload is low, they'll be allocated elsewhere. This system can be quite helpful, but the opposite is also true. If your bakery has an influx of orders, it can siphon workers from other jobs, which can leave you with pitfalls in other areas. As well as this, your city also needs a tertiary sector to keep functioning. Your population will want entertainers and speakers to keep them happy. You'll also want researchers to progress through the research tree, as well as guards, lawmakers and managers to keep things running smoothly. All of these require workers and again reduce your workforce pool. Now, the way that progression works in this game is by growing your population, which will unlock new milestones. Similar to City Skylines, these will unlock new buildings. Eventually, you'll unlock a research building, and that's where the game branches out entirely. The way research works is that you generate a pool of research points that you invest, but must keep invested in certain nodes on the research tree. This means that you can't simply unlock everything in a linear order. You're forced to pick carefully and specialise in specific branches. And this is where you can really tailor your playstyle to how you want your city to behave. You can prioritise agriculture to become a food-producing powerhouse, or you can maximise your craftsmanship to export new things and better things for gold. It's really a balancing act, and the research system has its own economy at play. Now that I've mentioned gold, I may as well cover the trading system quickly. Essentially, you'll place down an import and an export centre, and here you can specify what goods you like to buy or sell, and what percentage of your stockpile to buy or sell to. It's pretty basic, but again, like most things in this game, it works and it's quite intuitive. This is important because it's not really possible to efficiently be a jack of all trades in this game. It's much better to specialise in a few areas and use the exports of that surplus to support other industries. Again, this plays into the freedom of the game and it lets you play how you want. And what's really cool is that on the world map you can see individual trade caravans going to and from kingdoms and cities, yourself included. Unfortunately, you can't raid them yet, but it's still nice to watch trade routes form over the course of the game. And that brings me to diplomacy, which is somewhat limited right now. You can manually trade with other kingdoms, offer them military aid, or declare war and take their lands for yourself. It's a bit basic at the moment, but it serves its purpose well. As you develop, you'll also want to start thinking about raising an army, which works similarly to Dwarf Fortress in that you'll allocate, let's say, 100 civilians to train, and after which they can be called up to service. Though each soldier raised is a baker, potter, or a tailor not working, so it can be costly to do this, and in each battle, one death is one worker lost. The level of customization here is really great too. You can set their level of training, what gear they'll use, and more. You can set them in formations, sort of similar to Total War, though a bit more basic, and you can get some quite big battles going once you're later on in the game. And with all these systems, what you can do is really create a really organic form of growth for your city. I've not really seen this simulated too well in many games. Your small colony will soon become a hub, with many districts sort of growing off of it as you expand your city. You'll have industrial areas form, farming districts off in the fields, and areas dedicated to governmental functions. You'll have little villages far off from your main city with access to a specific resource. For example, I made a small coal mining village separate to my main city with its own food supply network and entertainment sources, essentially making a self-sufficient exclave on the same map. And that's really cool to see because it's sort of incentivized to do this in this game, whereas in other city builders you sort of just blob out from one central location. In this game you can be really strategic with where you place things, and there's no harm or downside to placing things far out as long as you cater to them and kept them supplied. And as you master all of these systems, you'll quickly grow your city to a few hundred, to a few thousand, to tens of thousands, all while balancing their needs. And it sounds really simple, but it is really quite fun, and it's quite rewarding to watch this happen. And this can get really deep too. You might have a few hundred elves living in your city, for example, who need to be kept separate from the other races. So you might have an elven quarter where they live alone to keep them happy. And this sort of self-narrative world building is really cool to see. It's very sandboxy like that. For example, you can choose a military playstyle. You might have hundreds of slaves from your conquests and you want to keep them secured and away from society, because if they revolt, they can cause chaos on your city streets. Put it simply, the sheer breadth of choice, player agency and replayability from these crafted gameplay mechanics is astonishing. It really cements the game as one of the best in the genre I've played recently. Oh, and I should also mention this game has full mod support and a Steam Workshop page, with hundreds of mods that add bucket loads of other features, flavour and more, adding even more replayability. Before I do conclude the video, I thought I'd share some stories of how some of my runs have gone, just to give you an idea of what can go wrong and some of the things that can happen. So my first human city was going pretty well, food was going well and other things were going smoothly until we had a massive immigration wave, about 30 new immigrants, something like that. And the settlers that live there currently were becoming increasingly xenophobic and unhappy. So they decided to have a riot and kill 9 immigrants and spiral. Basically, the settlement spiraled into a cycle of genocidal violence. And now my current run, the one I'm showing now on screen, nearly ended. It's still going when I neglected to build a shrine to an evil goddess for her worshippers. They all sort of became fanatics, banded together into a 30-man riot, ransacked the town square and attempted to religiously cleanse my other citizens. Luckily, I mobilised my army, killed most of them, and have now banned that religion in my city. So we're still going, for now. Now, my second human city was going even better, until they started demanding luxuries like furniture and better quality food. So much so that they all eventually went insane and, once more, descended into rioting and mass slaughter to cope. Now, my first Cretonian village, that's the Pigmen, population reached about the 200 mark, and it was my first time reaching this. I was quite chuffed, but I failed to account for their increased food intake. So when food stocks ran low, eventually hitting 0, they resorted to killing each other, probably cannibalism as well, and then there was a mass exodus of pigmen, leaving what little population left with no food and no workforce to make any more. Safe to say that they starved. I gave the Bugmen, the Garthme, a go. That run ended pretty quickly. Some local bandits tried charging protection money. I refused, and then within 3 days my town was overrun with thugs who destroyed everything, took the throne room, and I lost the game. So I got to this point in recording and I realised I could make an hours long rant about this game, go into every minute detail of the mechanics, but I'll cut it short to spare you the boredom of me just rambling about things. So in conclusion, Songs of Six is probably one of the best city builders I've played for a good long while. For a one-man developer, gaming like this is truly impressive to behold. The gameplay shines here, and the charming art and animations really give the feel of a living, breathing city that I've not really seen to this scale before. And what's more is, if this video hasn't at all convinced you, then there is a free demo on the Steam page. I'll put the link in the description. You can try it out for yourself for free. I really hope this game gets more attention because it really does deserve it. Hi there, thank you for watching the video. If you made it to the end, congratulations. You managed to sit through me rambling about a game that I like very much. Hopefully you do check it out. It's very much worth your time, even if it's just to try the demo. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here for one thing, and that is to shill my Twitch. So I'll leave a link to that in the description below the Steam page of the game. It would mean a lot to me if you could give me some time out of your day to check me out on Twitch. I'm streaming there. Let's think. What day is it today? God knows. I'm streaming there Thursday, Friday, Saturday this week, about 8 PM UK time, 9 PM Central European time. For any Yanks, I guess that's sort of anywhere between 10 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon. So if you aren't gainfully employed and you have time in your hand, then yeah, please do check me out. But yeah, thank you for watching this video. Peace. Right, you stay there. Turn on the doohickey. Hell yeah.